Ladies and gentlemen, I am Ken Wollack, President of NDI, and on behalf of my colleague and friend, Lorne and the board and staff members of IRI and NDI, I want to thank you for being with us for this very special evening. Tonight, we can celebrate the beginning of political change, but we also must recognize that the democratic struggle continues. In fact, we know it is never ending. At the outset, I would like to recognize the presence of members of Congress, their staff, and representatives of the White House, State Department, and USAID. At its heart, the mission of NDI and IRI, along with the National Endowment for Democracy, represents a public-private partnership, and we have been fortunate to benefit from the continuous support of 5 administrations. The United States Congress is a very special institution for Democrats around the world. In many instances, it provided them with their first international recognition. A number of those Democrats have become lawmakers themselves, including our guest of honor tonight, and they continue to look to the U.S. Congress for assistance and support. We also know that we are not alone in carrying out our democratic development mission. We are but 2 of the many organizations that have been part of a growing democratic solidarity network. These organizations are represented in this room, and we recognize your efforts tonight as well.
I'm Lorne, IRI's president. Let me join my friend Ken in welcoming all of you here tonight. A special welcome to the chairs of NDI and IRI, Secretary Madeleine Albright and Senator John McCain. It is fitting that IRI and NDI are led by 2 people whose very lives embody the idea of freedom and who have devoted so much energy and thought to democracy in Burma. We also have many members of the boards of IRI and NDI here with us. Ken and I would like you, in the spirit of the evening, to stand together at this time, if you would. Thank you. Thank you all for your leadership and guidance and support on our boards of directors. This evening would not have been possible without the generous contributions of 2 of you, NDI's Bren Simon and IRI's John Rogers. Thank you.
Lorne and I are thinking of taking this act on the road. We do, matter of fact. With less than 7 weeks before our own elections, this gathering may seem to many as an oddity, to others an unnatural act. To us, however, this type of cooperation in our democratic development mission is an everyday occurrence. But even if it weren't, Burma and the leader we honor tonight would have brought us together anyway. From an overseas perspective, our 2 institutes are known as American chapters of an international club of democratic, small d, political parties. This standing has enabled us to develop relationships with parties, parliaments, governments, and civil society, all dedicated to the notion that democratic partnerships, democratic government, and yes, democratic politics are a central end of human development as well as a means of achieving it. We have learned many things over the past 3 decades. Perhaps the most important is the understanding in this growing interconnected and interdependent world, democratic progress is inseparable from democratic cooperation. We are proud of our respective party roots, but as the language of democracy has come to influence the discourse within and between nations, the growing relationship between our organizations has become not only commonplace, but indispensable. And this evening, we are honored to celebrate this democratic cooperation, democratic solidarity, with someone of great courage, compassion, humor, persistence, and pure stamina.
As Ken noted, we've come together this evening to honor a legend of liberty, Burmese opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. It has been a privilege over the last 2 decades for us to assist her courageous cause. And tonight we pledge to Aung San Suu Kyi that as you wish, our assistance for Burma's democratic transition will continue. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening you were welcomed here jointly by the idealistic and pragmatic men and women of the National Democratic and International Republican Institutes. But you should know that at this very moment, in different time zones around the world, our staffs, Republicans and Democrats, are working together as Americans. They have for many years joined forces to assist the George Washingtons and Thomas Jeffersons of places like Burma, Zimbabwe, Cuba, and Belarus as they strive to bring liberty to their countries. By working together, NDI and IRI give two important messages about democracy. First, that political competition is essential, but that the losers live to compete another day. No one should go to jail or be exiled or shot because of who won. And second, that once elections are over, people should come together to solve a nation's problems. Those are novel concepts in many of the places where we work around the world, side by side. We do so proudly. Now, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy briefly your meal. Senator McCain will resume our program in approximately 20 minutes. Welcome.
Bon appetit.
Secretary Albright, ladies and gentlemen, good friends and honored guests, and our most distinguished guest of all, Aung San Suu Kyi, good evening. And on behalf of the International Republican Institute, welcome to a very special event. You know, all of us have a tendency at times to use words like heroic and extraordinary to describe many occasions that probably don't warrant the honor. I'm confident, however, that the truly historic and extraordinary nature of this event, the return of Aung San Suu Kyi to the United States after 4 decades, half of which she spent as a prisoner in her own home, is not lost on anyone. I know many of us wondered at times whether we would ever see this day, but no matter how long the wait, no matter how long the moment of liberation was deferred, we had faith that this day could not be denied forever, that eventually justice would be done, that Aung San Suu Kyi would one day be free, and that Burma, the country she loves so much and has served so well, would finally have a chance for a new beginning of peace and democracy. We had this faith for the simple reason that the lady inspired it, and that's why we honor her tonight. I know a little bit about suffering, and I've learned quite a lot about what it means to hope, to be inspired by those rare flashes of courage and serenity in the human spirit that come along so rarely and helps us to keep our faith and to endure. Aung San Suu Kyi has been that inspiration for her fellow citizens who look to her sacrifices and her strength to bear them. She was that inspiration throughout the many decades when their country was mired in darkness and tyranny. And she remains that inspiration now, when the hope of a new day of freedom is breaking in Burma, and when there is still much work to be done to sustain the democratic and economic reforms that have begun, and to expand the promise of those reforms to the many Burmese who still long for them, the political prisoners who are still detained, the ethnic minority communities who still feel left out of their own country, and the millions that are still trapped in poverty. The power of Aung San Suu Kyi's inspiration has defined Burma, but it has not been confined there. Hers is a global appeal to the North Korean citizen who is choking for freedom in that totalitarian system, to men and women in the Arab world who are rising up to change the character of their countries, to the millions of long-suffering people everywhere who believe that freedom and human rights are inalienable for them too. To all of these people, their world feels more hopeful, their adversities more bearable, because now they know of Aung San Suu Kyi. And if I could end on a personal note, The lady we honor tonight has been and remains a personal hero and an inspiration to me. I've known quite a few brave and inspiring people, but none more than the lady. I first met her 15 years ago when she was permitted to leave her house briefly to speak with me at the residence of the U.S. Charge in Rangoon. I was not prepared for her. She was exquisitely polite and graceful. She spoke softly and calmly, the picture of gentleness and serenity. In this, the woman I asked myself, who has managed somehow to cause so much trouble for the powerful, violent, cruel men who unlawfully ruled her country, the men who were so befuddled by the implacable resistance offered by this one gentle lady. They had attacked her, jailed her, threatened her, isolated her, and kept her from her family. They had done all that could be done to break her spirit and will to resist, but she never yielded. After our first meeting, I hung a photograph of Aung San Suu Kyi in my office to serve as a constant reminder of the just cause for which she was giving so much and for which she was willing to give everything else she could. For more than a decade, that picture had been my only connection to the lady. But in June of last year, I was permitted to return to Burma for the first time in 15 years. And on a warm summer day in Rangoon, I had the overwhelming experience of walking through the front door of the house where she had been shut away for so many years. We spoke for 2 hours, and when I left, I did so with a fuller heart, richer in spirit, and renewed in my confidence that freedom will conquer tyranny, good will conquer evil, and love will conquer hate in Burma and everywhere else. We gather here tonight, Republicans and Democrats alike, members of the two venerable institutions we represent, all of us together as Americans, all of us united in our shared admiration for Aung San Suu Kyi, and all of us joined together by our unfailing bipartisan support for the cause of freedom and democracy in Burma. That cause lives in the lady we honor tonight, and I am humbled and honored beyond words to welcome her to the United States. I'd now like to invite my good friend and our wonderful Secretary of State and wonderful person who has committed her life to democracy and freedom, and the chairman of the National Democratic Institute, Secretary Madeleine Albright.
Thank you very, very much, Senator McCain. My good friend, I think that kiss may repair a lot of things, so thank you very much. I am delighted to be here and very pleased to see so many friends. Senator McCain and I, as counterparts, have spent a lot of time together, and it is wonderful for NDI and IRI to be together, especially here in honor of our fantastic guest. I have spoken about Aung San Suu Kyi, my dearest friend, dearest Sue, on many occasions in the past, and have often had the privilege of introducing her in the form of an inspiring but nevertheless pre-recorded video message delivered from afar. In 1996, on behalf of the National Democratic Institute, I gave her our organization's highest award, in absentia. And so tonight, I think I speak for us all when I say to this amazing woman, welcome to Washington, but what on earth took you so long? It has been 2 decades since Michael Aris, Suu Kyi's husband, came to me with a request. He asked me to inquire whether Václav Havel would be willing to draft a foreword to a collection of her writings, which of course he was thrilled to do. This was no big deal for me, but it was the beginning of a start of a very personal connection that has grown over time. In 1995, when I was America's ambassador to the United Nations, word arrived that Suu Kyi had been released from house arrest, and this was 5 years after the elections in which her party had triumphed, only to have the outcome subverted by the military. The Clinton administration saw her release as a hopeful sign, and so when given the chance to visit Burma, I quickly agreed. During a breakfast meeting at her home, Suu Kyi spoke about the issues that would come to dominate her agenda for years to come, including the need for a democratic opening, an amnesty for those unjustly imprisoned, a plan for economic renewal, and an end to government by fear. In the 17 years between that breakfast and this gathering, events did not move along the path we'd envisioned, either for her or for her country. Instead, there were more crackdowns, more years under house arrest, more personal tragedy, and periods in which people of lesser strength would have surrendered all hope. But the yearning for freedom is relentless, and so is Aung San Suu Kyi. In 2008, the ruling junta adopted a new constitution, and in 2010, elections were held. That balloting was far from democratic and seemed only to promise more of the same. Yet over the past year, a series of positive steps have been taken. These include a reduction in censorship, the legalization of labor unions, the release from prison of many democratic activists, and Suu Kyi's historic decision to re-enter active political process. And nothing shows better how hungry the Burmese people are for democratic leadership than the overwhelming support given to Suu Kyi's party in last April's parliamentary election. This week, as we welcome Aung San Suu Kyi to our shores, we should do her the courtesy of thinking beyond the drama of her personal story to the hopes of the people she is here to represent, not just the members of her own party, but all who desire a role in choosing their own leaders and shaping their own laws. We recognize that there remains a constitutional bias in Burma that favors the military. The judicial branch lacks all independence, and the legislative system is fragile. Civil society is just beginning to put down roots. The media have yet to fully test their freedom, and ethnic violence tragically continues, and in some areas, a number of political prisoners remain in jail. As Americans, it's not our job to chart Burma's direction, but we have a responsibility to help when and where we can. The people of that country should know that the West wants nothing more than to see a Burma that is free, independent, united, and prosperous. And that kind of future is far from assured, but the path to extraordinary progress is open, provided the nation's leaders have the courage to embrace change, the willingness to implement democracy, and the good sense to listen to the lady. When I first met Suu Kyi back in 1995, I marveled at her discipline in being able to survive 5 whole years of house arrest. Now it's 2012. At almost any point between then and now, she could have obtained her liberty simply by asking to leave the country. But she refused to depart under those circumstances because she knew that she would not be allowed to return. She refused to remain silent because the words were the only weapons she had, and she refused to give up because her faith in democracy and her love for Burma were unshatterable. In the room we had breakfast 17 years ago, there was a huge picture of Burma's founding father, General Aung San. There was also a smaller photo of the general surrounded by his family, including a 2-year-old girl with deep, piercing eyes. In 1947, Aung San was assassinated, but his vision of a democratic Burma lives on in the eyes of that little girl, known to us now as a Nobel Prize winner, a member of parliament, and a source of inspiration to people everywhere who cherish freedom. In her recent address in Oslo, Suu Kyi spoke of the importance of kindness and the desire for harmony. For 2 decades, these qualities, though ever present in Burmese hearts, were pushed to the side of public life. Just recently, they have begun to flourish, and she is the reason why. I'm looking forward very much to coming to visit you now that I'm off the blacklist, a place I earned with honor. And so now, in that same spirit of harmony and bipartisanship, I am so pleased, on behalf of the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute, to invite Aung San Suu Kyi to come forward and receive a token of our joint admiration and respect.
Thank you. I was about to say that everywhere I can see friends, but actually I can't see a thing because the light is in my eye. But since I came to Washington, I have found that we have so many friends who have been helping us over the years, people who came to Burma under very difficult circumstances to encourage us, to let us know that we had not been forgotten. Because of their efforts and because of their unwavering support, I am here with you today. There are still many things to be done in my country, but I believe in our people, and I believe in Democrats everywhere. Democrats with a small d, I'll say. Well, that is what you taught me just now. I was listening very carefully. And so Democrats everywhere are very necessary for the world. Democracy is not perfect. I've never said it was, and I think everybody accepts that it is not perfect. But it is the best system we have been able to devise so far. The best thing about democracy, in my opinion, that it allows for political change without violence, without hurt to the country. In 1990, we had democratic, so-called, elections in Burma, and although our party, my party, the National League for Democracy, won 82% of the seats, we were never allowed to even go anywhere near the legislature. Instead, many of our members were imprisoned, and it was only after 22 years that we were given another chance to compete in democratic elections. This was last April when by-elections were held. There were only 45 seats going, and we were able to contest 44 of them. In one, our candidate was disqualified. Well, I will not go into that now, but that also is interesting from the point of view of democratic values and practices. But of the 44 that we contested, we won 43. This did not really surprise me. I was only a bit annoyed because we didn't win 44. But I think it surprised a lot of other people. This is because for more than 20 years, the propaganda had been disseminated all over the country and all over the world that the people of Burma no longer supported the National League for Democracy. Our victory in 1990 was considered something of the past, and the future, the present and the future, was interpreted as a phase completely divorced from that past when the people demonstrated their support for us so very clearly. However, last April, the people of Burma showed that they were still behind the NLD, or rather, I would say, with the NLD. The most encouraging thing about the by-elections was not that we won, but that the people had been so very quick to learn the value of their votes. This was what we concentrated on when we were campaigning. Our policy is not to make promises that we could not be sure of keeping. I consider it dishonest to make easy promises when we had no way of knowing whether or not we would be able to keep them. Some tell me that this means I'm not a real politician. But I don't agree with that, do you? I feel very reticent about giving my word if I cannot be sure of keeping it. So I would say very simply to the people, all I can promise at the rallies, all I can promise is that I will try my best. I was very heartened by the fact that our people understood that I would not be able to do more than my best. They accepted this. I was criticized for this by one of the by a politician from the other camp. He didn't use my name directly, but in one of his speeches he said, "What is the point of voting for somebody who will not make promises?" Now, I was interested to find that he said nothing about keeping the promises, just making them. But our people are far more sensible than that. And we concentrated on the importance of democratic duties as well as democratic rights. If you want rights, you have to be prepared to discharge your duties. And we explained that one of the primary duties of those who wish for democracy is to take part in elections, is to use their vote sensibly. And that they did. It was very touching to find how eager people were to vote in the last by-elections. In my constituency, which is not far from Rangoon, but which is actually made up of 127 villages and two wards in town. So it means that my constituency is really primarily a rural village constituency. In my constituency, I found very old people going out to vote, some accompanied by the grandchildren, and of course, young people as well, all those who had come of age. Everybody, almost everybody who was able to do so, took part in the by-elections. They performed their duty. And those who were not on the electoral list, because there were many discrepancies, there were many weaknesses in the way in which the elections were conducted. I think mainly because we are unused to multi-party elections. One had been held in 210, but to quote the United Nations, it was deeply flawed. And I think this is a very polite way of putting it. So when we had our by-elections in April, there were many who should have been on the list of voters, but who were not, and so therefore they were not allowed to vote. I was touched by how upset they were by this. They had absorbed our message that their right and their duty was one and the same when it came to voting. They had the right to vote and they had the duty to vote. And those who were unable to do so were deeply upset. And this, I think, is a good augury for the future of my country. The by-elections pleased us in other ways. The people were brave enough to vote for the party they wanted to support, considering the fact that Burma had lived under fear for decades. This was a tremendous sea change. We were so happy. Happy not because our people voted for us so much as that our people had dared to vote for us. And now we have to deliver. As I said earlier, we made no promises. Our candidates were warned that they should not make promises that they could not be certain of keeping. But although we made no promises, we know that our people have hopes and expectations for the future. This is only natural. They would not have voted for us if they had not thought that we would be able to make their lives better. And this is what we want to do now. Burma is at a stage when we can go forward and do great things. At the same time, there is still the possibility that we will disappoint our people, that we will dash their hopes, either by not bringing about change quickly enough or by bringing about change in the wrong way. Speed is not of the essence, but it does matter. Even though we have explained to the people that we cannot change everything overnight, they have the right to expect change within a reasonable length of time. There have to be short-term improvements as well as the long-term ones. If we can show our people that there can be improvements to their lives in the short term, they will be prepared to wait for the longer-term changes that they wish for. I'm most concerned about the young people in my country because they are our future. Unless we have the kind of young people who will be able to take over the responsibility of building our nation when their time comes, we will not be able to rest in peace about the way in which our country will be going. This means that we have to look to education and to health. A month or so ago, I went to a village and spoke to some villagers there about their needs. I was astonished by what one mother said to me. She was in tears because she could not send her children to school. She knew that their future would be jeopardized if they could not be educated. Others too spoke of the children's education, but what struck me was few spoke about their health. They were so concerned about preparing their children for the future through education that they had almost forgotten the physical needs, the medical needs, the health needs. I explained to them that it was not enough to have educated children. They had to be healthy. If their children were educated but unhealthy, they will not be able to use the education that they had acquired, either for their own good or for that of their community. So health and education are the essentials of a strong, healthy, younger generation who will continue with the process of democratization. Because I think that process will go on for a very long time. We now talk about the process of democratization in the country, and people ask me whether or not I think that is irreversible. Of course, everything is reversible. You must not forget that Burma was once a democracy, but that we came under military dictatorship and lost our democratic rights and democratic institutions. So nothing is actually irreversible. But we have to get to the point where stopping the process of democratization or turning back would be far too painful for anybody to contemplate. I would say that in theory, democracy is reversible, even in the United States. But I doubt that any one of you here spend restless nights worrying about a reversal to your democratic process. Because it is a process. We will have to keep going on, continuing to build up our democratic institutions and to assure that our people keep aware of their democratic rights and their democratic duties. I would like to appeal to our friends here and all over the world to help us to build a secure future for our nation. We need most help in health and education, but also we need help in other areas. For example, communications. When I say communications, I'm not talking of IT. I'm talking about roads. I'll talk about IT later because roads come first. We have poor roads all over our country. In my constituency, during the monsoons, the roads are so bad that some children are unable to go to schools which are situated in villages other than their own. This means about 5 months without going to school. We were one of the needs of my constituents are roads. I have to tell them that it is not very easy for us to construct new roads. This is a job that is usually done by the government. But we will try our best. We have tried our best to help our people as best we can, to make them self-reliant, to make them understand that they can do things for themselves. For example, when water is also in great need. You would not think so. You would not think that a country where it rains for about 5 months of the year would have problems about water. But we do, because sometimes the water is brackish. It's a question of not enough potable water. So we started out by digging wells. But when we dig wells, we set conditions. Well, first of all, we have to make sure that the well will be dug in a place where most of the villagers would be able to access easily. It should not be in anybody's private property, and it should be not too far away from the thickly populated areas of the village. And then we, of course, have to make the condition that the water has to be potable. I mean, if the water is brackish, if we don't have enough fresh water available, we do not go on with the digging of the wells. But we also set a fourth condition, that the villagers should be prepared to form a committee to take responsibility for the upkeep of the well, and that they have to be involved in all the preparations for the digging and for the maintenance. In this way, we seek to democratize our people, to make them understand not only that they have a duty to look after their own community, but they also have the ability to do it. In these small ways, we have been working since April to do our best to make our people self-confident and self-reliant, until our people believe in themselves and believe in their ability to sustain a democratic system. We cannot say that we have achieved democracy. I have been talking about the communities, how we are trying to teach our people to live in democratic communities. But we also have to think, of course, and very seriously, about democratic institutions: the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. The judiciary, I will start with because there's least to say about it. The judiciary is the biggest problem in Burma. For years, we have suffered from lack of independent and clean courts. This still prevails. Our people do not trust the courts. We do not believe in justice as delivered by the courts. And we know that for decades, our courts of justice were not free from the influence of the executive. I have to be honest and say that I am not sure how free our judiciary is now from the influence of the executive. I cannot say it is free. I cannot say it is not free. I'm trying to find out. a couple of months ago, I was made the chairman of the Committee for the Rule of Law and Tranquility. Yes, I know you all smile when I say tranquility, but actually it's very logical. Rule of law and tranquility are linked. I translate rule of law as a situation in which the citizens of a country can be confident that the law will protect them, that the law is there for their benefit and not that of the government or others who have influence and power over them. If people can be confident that the law is on their side, that the law is there for them and not to be used against them, then I think they will feel a sense of tranquility. To a certain extent, they will feel a sense of inner security that generates tranquility. So I'm quite happy about the Committee of Rule of Law and Tranquility, although I sometimes worry about the responsibilities that it entails. We will try very hard to do what we can within the year that has been assigned to the committee to improve the judicial situation of Burma. This involves not just the courts of justice, but lawyers, policemen, other security forces, the education of lawyers, the administration, and the dissemination of knowledge that our people might know what their rights are and how they may be able to get access to the protection of the law. Many things to be done, but I will say that I have been pleasantly surprised by the vigor of the legislature. Now, I have to also say that when we first came to the legislature in July, some of the representatives tended to nod off very often. But I think they're more wakeful now with the advent of the NLD. I don't want to take too much credit for my party, but I'm proud of the way in which our MPs have conducted themselves during the last session. I'm very strict with them, so I think that has a lot to do with why they've been behaving so well. I have been pleasantly surprised also by the fairness of the two speakers, the Speaker of the upper house and the lower house. They have treated us as an effective opposition, although there are only 44 of us in a legislature of 651. I feel we are going forward there in the legislature. With regard to the executive, by its nature, of course, it is more opaque than the legislature, but the president has initiated a reform program which could take us forward to a genuinely democratic society. But it is just the beginning. We do not know how the reforms are going to continue, because reform is a matter of substance as well as a matter of the right speed and the right sequencing. Reforms are difficult and complex, especially in a country like mine, where we have not known what reform meant for many, many decades. Too much is expected in too short a time. But we have to explain everything to the people. This is what we have to learn as part of the democratic process, that those who are in power have a duty to explain to those who put them in power, because that is how democracy works. Those who are in power because the people have placed them there through free and fair elections. And so those who are in power have a duty to explain to those who voted for them why they are taking the measures that they have chosen to take. This is essential. And also, those who voted the government into power have to understand how to ask questions. You would think that asking questions was a very simple matter. It may be in the United States, but not in Burma. Our people are now having to be taught to ask questions. It has not been part of our social practices for the last 50 years to ask questions of those in authority. So we have to start with such elementary lessons as how to ask questions. I don't think it's so simple. Sitting in the legislature, I have been surprised at what the questions are and what the answers are. They sometimes seem to have nothing to do with one another at all. It is incredible. Sometimes I don't quite understand what the questions are anyway, because they go on for such a long time that by the time they come to an end, I've forgotten what the beginning was about. And I suppose that is why the answers are quite different from the questions, that the person who answers also does not know what the question was about. But these are things that we can learn and enjoy learning. And I found that our people enjoy learning. Everywhere, all over the country, wherever possible, we have tried to set up courses for young people, courses designed to teach them to take part in democratic practices. But these courses are very simple and very limited, and certainly are not enough for us to use as a foundation for the future. And this is again where we need help from our friends. How to train our people to cope with democracy. I don't mean how to train our people to fight in the democratic way. I think they know that already. But we want them to be able to resolve their problems without turning it into a fight. We want people to understand that where there are problems, there should be solutions. And that is where the challenge lies, in overcoming the problems, not in avoiding problems. Problems cannot be avoided. So there is so much for our people to learn. When people ask me, what does the future hold for Burma? Then I would say, the future holds out a lot of hope for Burma. But for that hope to be realized, we have to work very hard, and we have to invite our friends to help us. I know that the world has been kind to Burma. I know how much goodwill there is towards us, how very much the world wants us to succeed. The world wants a success story, a happy ending. And we want to be that success story, that happy ending, which will make our friends feel that the years in which they've worked so very hard to promote democracy in Burma have not been in vain. I think I've taken up more than my share of time. I want to thank all of you very much for coming here to encourage me, to support me, and to allow me to see how important it is for us to try our best to succeed, that we may be able to repay the kindness that you have shown towards us. Thank you.
Well, I think we have our marching orders and our example. Dear Sue, thank you so much for teaching all of us a lesson in democracy.